is a really new technique, sort of new technique out there called flick shake. How many people have heard of flick shake technique? Raise their hand. How many? Less than 10 people. Okay. Flick shake. We're going to talk about the flick shake technique. And here's what the flick shake is. It's another one of these, boy, it's so simple. It's another one of these simple techniques that takes real simple components and makes this bait do something really cool. Okay? Start with flick shake head. And here's all a flick shake head is. You ready? It's a finesse wide gap hook with a weight attached to the shank of the hook. That's all it is. Some of the original flick shake hooks were finesse wide gap hooks that guys were taking split shots and crimping them on the shank of the hook. You know, now a lot of companies have come out with these ones that have the tungsten. Again, I keep mentioning it, the tungsten on the shank of the hook. This is a little head by a company called True Tungsten called a flea flicker head. Okay? We're going to get this thing, and we're going to get just a little short, little stubby worm, right? And we're going to make this thing do something really cool in the water. Another different action from all those other ones we talked about. For this deal, man, you could use anything you want, but the best baits to use on a flick shake are stubby, blunt end worms, right? This is a bait by Berkeley called a sink worm. Okay, it's called sink worm. Boy, but you could use any short little stubby worm. Senko, Yum Dinger, right? There's a million of them on the market. Just want a short little stubby blunt end worm. What was the other one? The Warrior bait. A real hot dog, an actual Oscar Mayer hot dog who worked on this technique. Catfish level. So we're going to get this little stubby worm, little sink worm, fat sink worm. We're going to get our flea flicker head, right? We're not going to nose hook it. We're not going to Texas rig it. Once again, how are we going to hook this thing on there? Wacky style, right? Wacky style means right through the middle. We're going to hook that thing right through the middle without even tying it on a rod or putting it on the water. That's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to get. Look at that thing. Look at that thing. Look at the action. Right? Just like that wet noodle rig, we're going to get an action. We're going to get legs that are flimsy, shaking. But now all of a sudden, instead of having the weight down here at the bottom, we've got the weight right on the shank of the hook. And boy, that thing's going to really pull it down. It's going to want to pull it. It's pulling down. It's pulling down on that thing. And as that pulls down, those arms and legs are going crazy. How many people fish with Senko or a salt stick bait style lure, right? You cast it out weightless, you know what it looks like. It kind of does that quiver. This thing does that same thing, but it's amplified because you've got that weight pulling those legs down. So you've got that same kick, but it's amplified. And the nice thing about this is, with a weightless stick bait, with a Senko or a Yum Dinger, or a Gulp sinking minnow, when you don't have a weight on there, how deep could you fish that bait? 0 to 10, 0 to 15. Even at 20 foot, you cast that weightless bait out there, it'd be like an hour before that thing ever got down. This flea flicker head, the flick shake head, is going to let this bait, let that action get to fish him. Never saw that yet. You know what I mean? Remember when that Senko first came out? Wasn't it crazy? Just throw it out. They just start swimming off with it. It's like the best thing in the world. But those fish get conditioned after a while. But the fish in the deep water live out a little bit deep water. I've never seen this bait. One trick I do to this bait, and then I'll end it and we'll open up for some questions, is to increase the action and to save the baits. I've got a little trick that I do. Another super expensive piece of equipment that I buy. How many people have had, you got that bag of Senkos you bought? I remember you went to Dick's Sporting Goods and you bought that bag of Senkos. I remember. You paid like $9 for 6 baits or something, right? And you put it on that flick shake head, you wacky rigged it, just like it said in the magazine. You're all excited. Kind of put it down in the water and you saw those legs go crazy. You're like, oh, this is great. And you're excited. You get out there and you get to your first dock and you go, okay, I'm gonna put it right there. jig head's there, and your sink goes about a mile that way. How many people have had that happen, right? Everybody. Or here's the other scenario. Get your first fish of the day on. Go, got him. It's a 2-pounder, man. You need this one. You want to put this one in the boat. Gets right near the boat, and he jumps, and all of a sudden you see something out there, corner of your eye, and he goes, boom. It's going that way. What the heck? I just paid 20 bucks for 6 baits. It's a little deal here that we're going to put on that bait that's going to increase the action of the bait. That's going to save our baits, right? A lot of people use O-rings. A lot of people use little wire rings. But here's something that's real cheap, real easy to do, and you're going to get more action and save a lot of baits. You ready? Real super expensive piece of equipment right here. You can get at any electrical supply store, hardware store, auto store. What is that? Heat shrink tubing. Heat shrink tubing. Look at that. You can get like 20 of them for $1. You can get them in different sizes, different widths to match the bait, whether you're fishing a 5-inch bait or a 4-inch bait or a thin bait or a fat bait. We're in a heat shrink tube. We're going to cut it down into 8-inch little collars, little bands. We're going to get that little 8-inch collar. We're going to stick it in the middle of that bait. We're going to get our lighter, our matches, our blowtorch, whatever's handy. Fire it up real quick. And that thing's going to condense around the middle of that bait, just like a band, right? So what we've done, we're going to get our flick shank hook. And in addition to going inside the bait, we're going to go under the collar of that heat shrink tube. So what we did there was a double deal. Not only is this going to act to save baits, you're going to be able to catch 10 or 20 fish instead of 1. You're not going to cast them off. But you're going to have a better action of that bait, right? Because now, instead of having a point of a hook through a soft bait, which will have spring, right? It'll have a lot of spring. Now all of a sudden we went under this, which is solid. So we've created a positive pivot point for that hook to go under and those legs to pivot on. Heat shrink. Super cheap, super expensive. $1 a pack. Saved a lot of money, saved a lot of baits. All right, I'm done talking. I'm getting hoarse. Any questions? Any more questions? It's a good question. The question was, how many different things did I try before I came up with the heat shrink? A lot. And some of those other ones work. You know, they've got O-rings, and they actually have a tool. You know, you put it over the tool, and it kind of slips onto the bait. They work, but they slip a little bit. There's another kind of like wire band you can put around there, and they kind of slip a little bit. This is absolutely the cheapest, best method I've found, you know? And what I'll do, if I'm in a tournament situation, I'll pre-do like 10 or 12 baits, and I can usually get through the entire course of a day with about 10 or 12 baits. You're still going to lose them every once in a while, but it's not as painful, you know? Yeah, the question was, chance of ruining the bait with too much? Absolutely. Too much heat? Absolutely. Yeah, it's real quick. This stuff shrinks up so quick, you almost kind of go around it real quick. If you start doing it, and all of a sudden your buddy calls you, you'll have a bait, a Senko on fire in your hand. Senko on fire! Senko on fire! Great question. The question was, that all the techniques that we just looked at, which one do I like best for bedding fish? Between the shaky head, the flick shake, the wet noodle, the tail weighted French fry, and the tube, I'd say my top 3 are the tail weighted French fry, the wet noodle, and the tube will be my top 3 baits. The tail weighted French fry is so unique in a bed because most people, when they throw something in a bed, they throw it in that, you see it, oh there it goes, you see that light spot, they back up, they put the power pole down, they throw over there, and it's a white lizard, or it's a big white tube, or it's a shark, something bright. God, everybody throws that. I mean, that's almost synonymous with sight fishing now. And it falls straight into the bed, sits there, all of a sudden, an hour later, then it hadn't had it bite. Now you come by, and you throw that tail weighted French fry past the bed, and you almost reel it up to the bed, and then lift your rod, and it falls backwards. Boy, you never saw that. It's such an antagonizer when that thing falls backwards. The wet noodle would be a close second. Same thing, you could throw it to bed and leave it there, and it sits horizontally off the bottom. It's a killer. The tube would be third. How many guys bed fish? I know a lot of guys don't. Sometimes you have to do it. You know, it's kind of an art in itself. I was a horrible bed fisherman up until I started rooming with a couple guys that were really good at it. John Cruz and Ish Monroe, two guys that are primo sight fishermen. And the biggest lesson I learned from those guys is not a color or a rod or a line or anything like that, but it's the theory that every bedfish has a different personality. Every one. I'm not kidding you. If there were 5 beds all in this tank and they were only 5 foot apart, each fish would act different. Each one has his own personality. And what I figured out is that you had to have a gamut of baits to find the trigger for that fish. When I was a kid and I was reading magazines about sight fishing, it was Guido Hibden with the G2 or G3 tube. You had to use a little spinning rod. That's just what I assumed you had to do. And then I show up and Ish has got a tube that's that big, and he's throwing it on braid in crystal clear water. I'm thinking, good God, is he for real? And then he comes in with 30 pounds of bass, and I'm like, oh, I should try this. What I figured out is each fish has a trigger. And what I like to do is I carry 5 different baits when I'm bed fishing. I still carry the little tiny bait, the little tiny finesse bait, a little tube or a little French fry. But then I carry something that's about that big. I carry something that's about that big. And then I carry one of those Ish tubes too that's that big. Carry 4 or 5 different sizes in 4 or 5 different colors. And you throw at that fish, and you look at the mood of that fish, and you keep changing baits until you find a trigger. So it's not only changing baits, but it's changing angles. So the first cast, I'll come straight through the middle of the bed. The second cast, I'll come through the left. The third, the right. The next cast, I'll stay in the corner. The next cast, I'll hop it through. And you keep changing until you see a trigger. Here's all a trigger is. That male's sitting in that bed, and he's, now that he knows you're there, he knows you're there. He'll know you're there. He knows you're there, so he's sitting back off the corner of the bed, and he's just sitting there. And he's watching the whole time. You go right through the middle of the bed, and he goes. And you go through the left, and he goes. You go through the right, and he goes. You hop it through, and he goes. And then the 5th time, the whole time you're changing colors, you're changing shapes. The 5th time you bring it through, and you kill it in the middle of the bed, and then you make a big hop. And all of a sudden, he goes. He spins around. And now he kind of looks at it on an angle. You found that fish's trigger, and you know you're going to catch that fish. And every one has its own trigger. That's the art about bed fishing. You know, they're all different. But if you have different sizes and different colors, you have all those baits rigged ready to go, you can catch it.